I've asked Whitney Harris if he would join us for a second and read an excerpt from his book. And the part of the book that I've asked him to grab a few phrases for us is an introduction which was prepared by Robert H. Jackson, dated February 1954, which was 1 month before he had his first heart attack. Subsequently, he had a second heart attack in October of 1954, died. And this piece, this introduction in the book by Whitney Harris, is probably the last written piece by Robert Jackson. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Whitney Harris.
Well, thank you, Greg, and it's a pleasure to be here and to share with you the last words, as far as we know, of Justice Jackson on the Nuremberg Trial. He said, "If mankind really is to master its destiny or control its way of life, it must first find means to prevent war. So long as it cannot, war demands will dictate the course of our collective and individual lives. And if we are to come to grips with the problem of preventing war, it is important that we know how wars are made, to what extent they result from impersonal pressures and tensions, and how far they are due to blunders or pugnacity of individual statesmen or political forces. Never have the archives of a belligerent nation been so completely exposed as were those of Nazi Germany at the Nuremberg Trial. In its preparation, over 100,000 captured documents were screened, about 5,000 were translated, and over 4,000 were used in evidence. Some of these ran to several volumes. They were not old records dragged to light by a subsequent generation which knew not how to value them. They were laid out in a courtroom before the very highest of their surviving authors, who, with able counsel and first-hand knowledge, subjected them to correction, explanation, and attempted justification. The result is a documentation unprecedented in history as to any major war. Lord Acton, in his inaugural lecture as a professor of history at Cambridge, said, "We are still at the beginning of the documentary age, which will tend to make history independent of historians." It may be doubted whether we are more independent of historians, however, when such an avalanche of documents descends upon the world, that their meaning and import can be learned only from fair and intelligent arrangement, condensation, and interpretation. This, in a hurried and partisan way, both the prosecution and the defense attempted to do as part of the trial. But as record of 42 volumes is too vast, detailed, and disjointed for general study. Now Professor Harris, by scholarship and experience admirably qualified, in the calm of the intervening years, has prepared a factual summary of the evidence that is objective, accurate, and comprehensive. It constitutes a report of the Nuremberg post-mortem examination of the Nazi regime and its part in causing World War II. General understanding of the trial, the importance of a summary of its policy, proceedings, and evidence in a single, readable, and reliable volume is apparent. We are much too near the event to pass judgment on the ultimate influence of the Nuremberg trial on the development of international law and policy. Procedurally, we know it demonstrated that there is enough fundamental harmony and likeness in our Western systems of law, including the Soviet, so that 5 separate professions can join in the conduct of a legal proceeding. This means that the actions, if they will do so, nations, if they will do so, can utilize legal techniques in a much wider field than had heretofore been deemed possible. Many mistakes were made. No critic knows that as well as we who were responsible for them. But in an effort so unprecedented, the profession may learn as much from its failures and mistakes as from our accomplishments. The contribution to substantive law may not yet be discernible. The United Nations has given general approval to the Nuremberg principles, though it has not been able to progress with their codifications beyond the point to which they were already codified by the London Agreement and Charter. Meanwhile, these principles are taking their place in the scholarship of international law. It is perhaps significant that despite German dislike for the war crimes trials, Western Germany has embodied in the Bonn Constitution its most basic principles. The London Agreement and the trial pursuant to it started a movement in the world of thought that is deep and enduring. Professor Harris is one of a large staff of men and women who were inspired by the ideals of the Nuremberg effort and whose loyalty and hard work are to be credited with their success in practice. His manuscript teaches me that the hard months at Nuremberg were well spent in the most important, enduring, and constructive work of my life. Robert H. Jackson.